This statue stands outside the New York Buddhist Church, the largest Buddhist church in the New York region. Over the years, the church has been a center of hope for Japanese Americans, especially those interned during World War II.
We were given numbers, so my family number, that's still embedded in my head. My family number is 8395.
Eileen Yamaguchi was one of 120,000 Japanese Americans rounded up and sent to internment camps after war broke out with Japan. She spent her early years with her family in a camp in Colorado.
All the 10 concentration camps were barbed wired, and they had sentries. They had U.S. Army built towers outside of the camp, and with sentries holding the gun. And it was always interesting. The guns were directed toward inside the camp, as if we were going to run away.
Because they were not allowed to have coal, that all went to the military.
Nancy Okada's grandfather, a Buddhist minister in Hawaii, was also taken away.
My uncles always resented the fact that with no explanation at all, they were getting ready to eat dinner. The FBI came in and took their father away. They just said, just get your coat, you're coming with us.
All the community leaders were seen as a potential threat to U.S. security.
It affected the businesses, presidents of businesses and companies, banks, newspaper. All the heads of those industries were picked up right away by the FBI, and then religious leaders were all picked up.
Among them was Reverend Hosen Seki, who founded the New York Buddhist Church in 1938. According to his son, Hoshin, he was in Washington, D.C. for a religious service when the war broke out.
When the Japanese had bombed Pearl Harbor, he was actually at the Japanese embassy on that exact same date and time. Right after the service, they told my father to leave the building immediately. And so he knew that sooner or later they were going to come and take him to an internment camp.
Hoshin was barely a year old at the time. For the next few years, the only communication in the family was through heavily monitored letters.
It wasn't like I could just write a letter and say anything I wanted to say. Someone was looking at everything.
Despite the internment of their relatives, close to 4,000 young Japanese Americans agreed to volunteer for the American Army.
Here we are, we're in the camp, we lost our freedom, our rights, and meanwhile, our own brothers and some sisters volunteered to go in the army to defend our country which betrayed us and put us into camps.
In August 1945, the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb in Hiroshima. The war was over, and celebrations erupted all over the country. But for the Japanese Americans, things were different.
Once they saw the destruction, many people did go into shock that the U.S. government would do this to a population.
I can't accept any kind of justification for dropping the bomb. I just hope that something like this will never happen again.
The Japanese Americans were allowed to leave the camps, but with widespread discrimination, they knew they had difficult times ahead.
One minister was a janitor for a while, and people used to say, how could you do that? But if your main objective is to get money to go home, and you know that you are still oppressed to a certain extent because of your nationality, there were very few jobs that they could get.
After Hoshin's father was released from camp, he returned to his church duties. He and community leaders, like Nancy's father, helped people rebuild their lives.
My father and about, 6 others formed a group to help people find housing, schools for children, doctors, possible jobs.
In 1955, Reverend Seki learned that the Japanese government had offered to send a symbol of peace from Hiroshima to the UN, the statue of the founder of their Buddhist sect. Despite being just a mile and a half from ground zero, the statue has survived the atomic blast. When the UN refused to accept it, Reverend Secchi said he had just the spot in front of his church.
When I first came over here, it was still, I don't want to say highly radioactive, but it was radioactive.
The legislation that I am about to sign provides for a restitution payment to each of the 60,000 survivors.
It took over 40 years for the American government to apologize for what it had done. Those who were interned were given $20,000.
Wasn't the money as much as the government recognizing that it had done wrong?
Reverend Secchi died 3 years after the apology was made. At age 70, his son runs the education center at the church his father founded. The statue represents a religion of forgiveness, as a silent witness of racial discrimination in the most destructive moment in human history.